All right, today is the kind of the special start early meeting for Parks and Rec. So everybody should have had a copy of our last minutes and had a chance to go over them from March. Can we get, is there a motion to approve those March minutes?
Make a motion.
Doug, second. Jim Simon. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, we want to move forward. This could be a long meeting. We schedule it for 5:30. Just with that in mind, it could run a little long because we're going to talk about major projects that we foresee in the future, a 20-year projected project list or whatever. So I want to start with Bo and Spencer and Dustin because they are going to talk about Auburn Farms real quick and the color scheme, because Bo needs to we need to get an approval on the color scheme so they can move forward. They wanna move forward, get started right away. So we're gonna start with that and then we'll go into the other portion. First of all, for those that maybe don't know, let's get our visitors to introduce themselves. Bo, would you go ahead and
Sure.
do that again?
So she might be excited. Oh, there's two. Let me just swap this there.
I'm hoping.
Are you equipped to take notes? Yeah, okay. Kara, you're also the,
Yay!
we're gonna go with visitors, introduction of visitors, so go ahead. Bo.
Yeah, so I'm Bo Braman with HHPR. I'm the civil engineer and project manager for the Auburn Farms project. And it's about my fourth time in here. I think it started with nothing and then it slowly has progressed. So we're currently at about a 95% level. So I'm kind of at the last, this is last moment to kind of talk about color schemes for things. And then I think my goal is by Wednesday night to submit the bid package to Jerry. So we're getting close, so.
Great.
My name is Tim Wood. I'm a project manager with Bowman Consulting / SMS Group. We're helping the city with your parks SDCs. So we'll go over some of the background on SDCs and how, how we're going to look to you to help us move that.
Everybody's familiar with Spencer and Dustin. Okay. Maria, back there in the,
Office specialist for public works.
okay.
I'm Doc Hardy, I'm the planning director, interested in your commentary tonight on the parks list, 20-year list. This feeds into a lot of other things we're doing, urban growth boundary expansion, and I'm really glad to have Tim here and FCS Group as part of that, as well as Brian, who is really instrumental in the Parks Advisory Group.
Okay, so Bo, why don't you go ahead and start?
Can you pull up this one?
These first few topics will be, well, at least this part will be relatively quick, because these guys are dialed in and.
Well, just to give you a heads up, they went through all this with Parks and we're
Okay.
gonna have some recommendations for this group.
Okay.
So that might help.
Yeah, so at the moment, we've kind of reviewed all the park equipment, and I think we met what I was hearing the feedback for, like the smaller toddler areas that aren't enclosed, the bigger areas, the ADA accessible, merry-go-round, the swings that have baby swings plus the ride along with your parent swing. So I think my understanding is we've approved kind of the playground equipment. So that, one of the feedback comments we got last time was looking at my sketch, it kind of seems like things weren't cohesive. And I reached out to the 3 manufacturers, and we do have cohesive color palettes that we could do. And so I use this as the basis for the color scheme for our park, which this is, they call it like peacock, pebble, teal, tangerine. They got some grays in there. So reviewing through the 3 manufacturers with the different pieces, every single one of them have that similar color palette. So this thing could look very like it was almost made by different people. We have, the merry-go-round's only made by one manufacturer. So we have some pieces where we couldn't get everyone to do the same thing, but I've sent over a list of all the colors that people offer. And so I guess if this is not the color scheme you want, then we would need to pick off kind of a color scheme from these pieces here. And, because part of it is making bid doc, it has to be biddable, right? And it has to be, so somewhere a contractor has to know what they're going to send me submittals on, and that I approve that they can go buy. And so we gotta figure it out, So I guess that would be opening it up. I think part of the playground, or part of the whole park is you also have a restroom. You also have site furnishings, and you have the gazebos. I thought we'd start with this because this has, our playground structure has 9 pieces or whatnot. So I guess the question was, did we have any feedback on this color scheme is likable or not? Or if not, I need to know what we want, right?
Well, let me just chime in here a little bit. I reached out to Tara Abbott from Auburn Farms and from Gina Dubois from Dodge Development, and Tara said she is fine with any color palette. She didn't have any. She wasn't able to come because she's got kids in 2 different directions she's running, so she wasn't able to come, but she's fine with the color palette that is chosen. So she's the rep from Dodge. Or from Auburn Farms. I think it's good.
Second. There is always chances to pivot. The problem is you can't pivot forever.
Yeah, these guys go through
Absolutely.
their recommendation and just get comment from the group.
Yeah,
Okay.
show what you have, and then we'll get comment from the group back.
So I think the biggest thing that was brought up was just the color of the slide being that yellow. With it being a lighter color like that, it's gonna get marked up, cannot stay as nice. Dustin, which one was it that?
As far as we've just picking off a palette, so those are the colors that would be like kind of what we were just looking at, but it was BM, we like BM right there in front, where it's kind of like, because now if you go off of what we were even going with, the color of the buildings, the bathrooms, we have like we went with buckskin for the sides and charcoal gray for the roof. And
Can you, on back up to that PM, where did you find that from?
it is, if you,
That was the
on
link,
the email that was sent.
the link that you sent for the colors.
You got you eventually to this one?
It was onto this. There was 5 pages that came up.
Okay, and that was from my first.
That was the one, that was the one that you sent off yesterday.
For playgrounds.
Yes,
Okay, so, yeah, so I'll.
if that works.
Yeah, I'll coordinate with the 3 manufacturers and make sure we can get something like that. And my thought is that, you know, and the specials, it says contractor will provide submittals, including colors.
Right.
So we would, you know, basically my thought is you would take the playground equipment and you would just point on arrows, this is this, and then we'd order a special that way. So yeah, if that's what we want, I can definitely verify that all 3 have something similar. Yeah, okay. Then buckskin and charcoal roof, okay, that's great.
And as far as, why can I think of what that's called?
Gazebo.
Gazebo.
Yep.
It's like the same kind of, it'd be black poles that go up to another granite roofing. So we kind of have this like, kind of,
What black, Dustin? It was a certain black.
It was the jet black for the gloss. That way,
Jet black, yeah.
in case somebody did go and vandalize it some way, the parks guys
And
said
then charcoal roof?
charcoal roof.
Awesome.
Kind of a bluish charcoal theme between the playground and then the 2 buildings is kind of what staff had for a recommendation.
Can we go back to the playground colors?
Yes.
And while you're doing that, is that the colors that you guys chose, is that kind of typical in the other parks that we have in the city, like Timber? Or
Each playground would then have its own kind of color
Color
structure. So
I'm talking the
Tannish.
restroom and restroom and roof.
no, this one was theme specific for each park.
Okay, yeah.
So
other than it's always black benches. And I
Yes.
think we're moving to black garbage cans.
Yes.
What was the other black thing?
drink.
Drinking fountain. So that was the blue to black with the drinking
So
fountain.
you want black benches, black drinking fountain, black bike rack,
Yep.
black benches.
Yep.
So just black for the little site furnishings.
Yep.
From Dubar or that
Yep.
other guy, and then the 3 big ones would be this color scheme.
Yep.
Awesome.
If that was,
And then doesn't Dune, it kind of goes with that buckskin, right?
yes.
Yeah, so that's where, so you just kind of got this charcoal blue colored with, I guess like kind of like light tan buckskin color. But yeah, so that would be the playground, however they would make that up.
Yeah, you could call off the posts, the platforms, the slide, you know, so I think on the
The rope
top,
is
the
black.
rope is black, yeah, so you can kind of call off the pieces. And kind of just back up real quick, what I'm gonna do in the process is, you get it out to bid, you gotta bid for a month, you gotta go to the council, you gotta, you know, we still have like a 2-month process before you're there. In the meantime, I'm going to be reaching out to the specific vendor of the restroom, the playground, and the gazebos, and asking them for signed drawings specific for our project. And so I can take it say, hey, these are the colors we wanna use, this is exactly what we want, give me, you know, they can even do renderings, you know, it's like, I want something that, in that meantime, I can get even more stuff for a contractor to be like, you know, make it like dummy proof. Just the most important thing is to get it out to bid, or we can't go to construction, right? So.
Carol, where were you going? You had it.
Well, personally, I think playground colors should be really fun. And I kind of feel like that's a little drab. And I would prefer something like be in is in Nancy. Just to have those colors that pop and feel like, I mean, you know, the swimming pool blue and the greens and, you know, I just feel like that's really fun looking.
It still kind of goes with.
And it's
the color
still,
scheme,
yeah,
Cause
And
we're
that's
gonna
why
have
we're here,
grass
Tara,
turf.
Yeah.
is for that.
I mean,
input.
that's my 2 cents.
You still get the grays, which will match that restaurant, right?
David?
I was kind of thinking the same thing, that's why I like the orange, I hear what you guys are saying, but I like the orange because it's like a pop, you know?
Yeah. It's,
Yeah.
yeah, it's something that makes it, I mean, it's just,
I hear what you're saying, I mean,
yeah,
it's a little dull. It's
Dark.
yeah, that's kind of how I,
I'm just wondering why these guys like it, was it for vandalism and stuff, you thought it was worth better?
No, I don't think anyone really had a big issue with the original one.
We didn't like the yellow slide.
It was, the
Yeah.
biggest thing was the yellow slide.
yeah, I'm
We
not
were
red
just gonna
hot on the
switch
yellow
that
slide
before
either.
we started going out these palettes.
So in your colors, can you go back to B and what color would you think the slide would be in your color palette?
I would guess, either like the lagoon up there and I mean, because to address the concern about the lighter color being,
Marked up by tennis shoes or kids
Right.
deciding to take their bikes or something.
I mean,
like
I
that.
think the lagoon would be a solution to that issue. If that's possible.
Anything's possible, I'm just, you know, just kind of trying to envision.
Yeah,
That's why.
What color are the poles, but if the lagoon's the slide, then are the poles green? You know, cause you're kind of thinking, you know what I mean, cause you can't have it all be blue. you know,
No.
Right.
So where does the green come in? Then your poles are green.
Right.
So if you go back to like, yeah, I mean, you know, I don't
There's
like,
like 6 pages of all these different
yeah,
palettes
yeah,
that you can look at.
it's hard. It's hard once you see this one, it's hard to vision how it's gonna
Right.
look differently, you know what I mean?
Anybody else have any comments? I mean, Careless was maybe BN instead of BM.
Almost like right next to each other.
Or BJ up there, it's kind of similar. But maybe some more darker colors, I don't know, I mean, I just feel like that's probably one of my least favorites.
Where's, can you find the one that I had?
Yeah,
Is that one, but maybe we could just change the slide to, it might be easier to vision it.
That was our first thought, we just changed the color of the slide, but we didn't know if we had to go off one of these palettes, so if it's
No,
just a.
if you like the aqua, so if you like the one that I have, and you like the aqua blue, and the light blue, and you know, then if you just wanna change the slide to like a dark gray.
Oh, and he
okay.
liked this, it's a granite.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Can you
that-
find that?
So if
It's
you
on
know, like,
page 2.
because if you look at the platforms of mine, the platforms are gray.
Mhm.
So if you just did a dark gray slide, then you'd still have your aqua colors. And you know,
I think that would look
I
nice.
didn't go with that picture.
that, I mean, that one that you have with the display, if you could just change the slide.
Yeah.
And this is what he liked,
Match the floor.
or Ken, he liked this granite. For a slide, just for, which you can't bring that up.
so yeah, there's
There's no pop then, like if everything's just gray and blue.
Yeah,
There's no
I
pop,
agree.
like she was saying, like a.
True.
You need a orange or.
Or something, the grass green, the real, you know,
yeah, the grass is green.
the vibrant green,
All day.
that celery kind of color.
How do they weather the colors? Like, does one color weather better than another?
Now, with this newer stuff, it does pretty good, the UV's taking pretty good, it's better than the old stuff.
Really?
I think you'd find, whatever color you choose, I think would be fine, Jim. I mean, if you guys like the yellow, I mean, we just make a recommendation just off of the black marks, but if you like what he has designed, laid out already, that makes it super easy on both.
Is that black color on the side and make it a real hot zone? Absorb a lot of heat.
Good, yeah.
Be an issue as well.
know, there's kind of your colors. So we were doing like sky, peacock, you know, so you have 3 different colored blues in there.
Yeah.
And then the orange, the tangerine, you know, that was kind of the pop. But yeah, if you wanted to go like peacock. Oh yeah, I'm having a hard time envisioning how the different blues and greens would all work together, like which one would be the pull, which one would be the accent. Another thing I could do is I could reach out to the manufacturer if you guys picked one of those palettes
Mhm.
and you told me like, hey, the thought is the slide, we want the darker color, you know. Can you resend that with these colors? I might be able to get that. It's just, you know, and I think colors you could also kick past the contractor will ultimately have to submit a package to us for approval. So you don't have to have the colors picked right now, but it's like, we don't do it now, when do we do it? Are we doing
It'd
it
be
in 3 months and do
really
it, you know,
nice.
then the contractor's gonna be like, what do I order? And then these things have like lead times of months.
Right.
So I'm trying to get ahead of the game. And I think the biggest thing was coordinating the restrooms and other stuff, but if you kind of think of the grayish ones, and then you can kind of coordinate the brightness with the playground, that gets you closer, right? You know, you want the charcoals and the blacks for the restroom and the gazebos.
Pull up that, equipment, playground equipment as code. Is everybody opposed to that?
So that's 3 different colors of blues in there. There's like aqua.
Right, so if we did the, you know, that, I think it's called limon. Of course, that's back to the lighter color, but if we did maybe this on the slide and then the limon on the, something like that.
Yeah.
Then we have pops and,
I mean, we can debate colors.
We got it.
It's gonna get done.
We wanna.
Yeah.
Do we just wanna build this right
No.
here?
I mean, I think, well, listening to what Kara says, I mean, I don't have a problem with that. I don't know if we need to run vote on it. I mean, does anybody else have an opinion on that playground equipment, that color scheme? I mean, is that in favor of that or not in favor of that? Or would you just change the slide color if you think it's gonna scuff? Put the yellow somewhere else.
And then the other option is that you go back to the palette that you said you liked, the square palette. I was looking at. In the specials, I can write in that these are our color palettes. For, you know, like that's our color palette, we have it kind of on document, this is the color palette we're gonna use. And then in that meantime, so that if you like that BN, if that's what kind of your vision is.
Yeah.
I'll just write it in that our color palette is this. In the meantime, I can try to get, you know, I mean, these people we're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on the playground, but they'll draw it the way
Right.
we want, right? So if that's the palette you want, I'll get you another rendering
Yeah.
with that color palette. And for tomorrow, I'll just say that these are our colors in the equipment, because no matter what, we have to approve it before the contract applies.
Yeah.
So it's just, that will give me 2 months to send you guys visuals, you know, with that color. So if you pick, you know, pick the palette you like, and I'll kind of send it over and you can say, oh, switch it, you know what I mean? We have some
Yeah.
time.
well, I mean, that would be my
I
choice,
see a good
but,
starting point.
but maybe we do need to go around the room and see, you know, I mean, even if we just narrowed it to those 2, BM or BN, and then just kind of said yay or nay.
I'm fine with being, I mean, does anybody else have a?
Well, it raises the question though, the pop of color, whether it's yellow or red or orange or something, if we do the BN, it looks like it doesn't have that accent color. I like the idea of black being sort of the baseline with the, you know, all of the accessory things like the trash can and the bike rack and all of that sort of thing. But I think that the play equipment, it kind of reminds me of a box of Crayola crafts. It's playful and it's inviting.
Well, I think that line green.
Yeah.
whatever that is, would be,
Right.
I think, can we, if we said to you, Bo, if we said our palette choices might be BM or BN, just give you a couple palette choices and let you run with it, I mean, because we can sit here all day.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, I can do those 2. And I think for now, we would just have to kind of kick the specs down, color to be chosen, whatever, right, the contractor to. Cause I don't, I don't think we can write 20 different colors, but I think what I can do in the background is try to get this rendering 2 different options with both of those, right? And then the idea is we want a darker color slide, that's what we're hearing.
All right, so all in favor of the BNB and moving forward, let Bo do his thing and come back with a different rendering. All in favor, maybe say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
I like this.
You
I
like
think
that?
anything's gonna be marked up.
Right.
The other thing to consider is the turf is green, so that's another reason where, when you have the green playground equipment, green and green, it's probably won't pop as much as the whole ground is ground too, so that's something to consider.
Yeah.
Almost there. So we have this one done, so that's fine, so that one doesn't have to go away, so I'll just come up with another couple of those and.
Right, we'll have, that'll work.
And
That'll work.
We'll have 2 to choose
Yeah,
from.
you guys can vote in the background and just.
Right. Yeah. All right.
So, okay, I guess what's that, so Vitch's, pet station's black, garbage can's black, gazebo is black pole jet black gloss with a charcoal roof, picnic tables are done for black.
Yep.
Bike rack's black, turf, we decided just to go green and we're not doing any sort of colors and patterns and things. Okay. Bathroom we talked about. It's buckskin with a charcoal roof.
Was that that design that you sent us last time had a pattern in there in the flooring?
I think if you scroll down, maybe.
For the basketball court?
No,
No, like, so like on the grounds, so our very first design had something like this where like in the toddler area, it was like kind of circled around with a different color, like our first one had some different patterns. And then I sent over like, example to, or you guys consider this, and I think Jared said all green. But yeah, now's the time, like, if we wanted to come up with a pattern, I could draw something in plan view with, some sort of color, but then once again, you gotta pick the colors, right? You want green and blue, or,
Then you gotta store that extra turf and all that, that's, which is fine, we go through that with the softball field.
Softball and baseball.
And baseball field. Softball, baseball field.
Okay, I mean, yeah.
But no, we're good with it, it's just, so
Um,
are we good with all green?
sure. The basketball court, I had a question. Is there a way you can color that up a little bit, like the 3-point, inside the 3-point line would be one color and outside? Or inside the lane? Or is that gonna be?
well, it's asphalt, so it's not like you can't color asphalt, so it would be paint.
Yeah.
Which would wear off and look black after a while.
Never mind, forget it. Yep. Okay.
Pedestrians will mark that up. For the 3-point line.
So, work. Is everybody good with Bo? Anybody have any other questions for Bo? Okay, there you go, Bo.
Can't catch up on info, some electrical stuff real quick. We're almost there, guys.
Before we get on to Ryan Potter and Tim, before the June 30th deadline, there are 4 people that need to reapply for the Parks Board. And that would be myself, Andrew Hale, who's not here, Kathy, and Ryan Oliver. So, have intentions of staying on the Parks Board, you have to reapply before the June 30th. And then we have election of officers in June. Okay, Ryan, take it away.
Okay, so we're gonna talk about SDCs and project lists that feed into the SDCs. This is mostly the presentation Tim is gonna give. He has some slides. This is something we've already talked about before, but Tim's gonna give some more clarification on the parameters of how we develop this list and why we're doing it. But as we've discussed before, we're updating all of our SDCs citywide, and parks is a big one, and we know this was an effort that we had started kind of halfway a couple years ago as part of the master plan, but we're doing it bigger and better this time. And so a big piece of that is a list of projects that are SDC eligible that will help support the methodology, which includes the new rates that we're gonna be charging development. So with that, we're happy to have Tim here. He's part of our consultant team that's been working on the SDC update overall.
Great intro, thanks, Ryan. Can I get the mouse so I can?
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for taking the time to chat with me today. Really happy to have your input. So we'll be talking about the Parks SDC, and just to give you an overview of what we're going to talk about, I am going to take us back to SDC 101. So, forgive me if this is redundant with stuff that you've already gone over, but I figured it'd probably be good to just kind of level set. And then we'll go through some of the policy issues that we're sort of considering at the outset as we calculate the Parks SDC. And let you guys kind of weigh in and consider that before we start, burning any budget, calculating anything. We'll go over your current SDCs, your project list, forward-looking stuff, and then sort of like the level of service and how that relates to the way we calculate SDCs. So, starting our SDC 101 here, the legal framework for SDCs is pretty straightforward and pretty rigid, which is nice for us practitioners, because there's only so much stuff that we can get away with, and there's it's a pretty uniform process. So it's all laid out in ORS 223, 297, and we'll kind of go over the high points here. So key characteristics of SDCs are that they're one-time charges that are paid at the time of development. So not an ongoing rate, not something that's charged to your household or to your business, as long as they're not developing. They're available for all major utilities, so that's water, wastewater, stormwater, transportation, and parks in Oregon. They're for capital only, so we can't be using it for operations and maintenance or personnel, anything like that, just those ongoing expenses. SDCs, they include both a future and an existing or reimbursement fee component, and we'll kind of touch on that really quickly, but that won't really be the key discussion point tonight. And then of course system facilities, not local facilities. So that's more relevant for stuff like streets, in parks. It's a little bit less, that caveat's a little less relevant. So generally an SDC calculation, pretty simple. Basically your eligible costs over your growth in system demand. So in parks, we typically, growth in system demand is expressed in population. So it's basically the question of, okay, well, what does it look like over the planning time frame? In this case, we're looking at 20 years. So we're looking at 20-year growth in population. And we're looking at, for improvement fee, the eligible cost of planned additional facilities that will be used to address the needs of that growth. For the reimbursement fee component, that's kind of expenses that the city's already incurred to create parks facilities. So there's a certain amount that the city can get back from their expenses that they've already made, and those funding sources are a lot more flexible. So we add those two calculations together: the eligible costs divided by the growth in system demand, and that's your SDC. And so this is a really important part, and this is where you all come in. So we've already completed the master plan, Parks Master Plan, very recently completed that. The next step in the cycle there, you can see, is the project list. So that's where we figure out, okay, what are our, the system expenses that we're going to incur in the next 20 years to address, kind of existing and future needs for the park system. Then we take it from there through the SDC methodology and implementation steps. At that point, the city takes over the implementation, where they gather the SDC revenue and how they're using it on additional infrastructure. So in the long run, that project list, the projects that are on that project list will get funded by those SDC funds. And just to kind of further, kind of get this point across, there's the system, the improvement fee cost basis, that's what we're talking about, that's gonna be the bulk of your charge. So there's a portion of that that is SDC eligible, which will address the needs of growth as time goes on, and we'll kind of get into the way that that's calculated. And then there's the portion for existing customers, so basically just, that's often operations maintenance, but it may also be correcting deficits, and we'll get into the way that looks. Existing conditions for your SDC, you can see Canby all the way over there on the left, so you're doing pretty good in the context of the metro. Now, of course, on the right, you've got, much lower growth and higher, real estate costs. Communities like Oswego or South Hillsborough, where the SDC for parks there is, in the excess of, it's excessive anyway. So Canby's SDC burden pretty low. So the thrust of tonight for the input that we're looking for from you is input on what the project list looks like. So the master plan has given us a sense of sort of what the city wants to fund, but a lot of that is intermingled with personnel costs, operations and maintenance costs, that kind of thing, programs. That's not what the SDC can fund. So the project list that we're looking for from you all is capital, kind of bigger, newer parks, or replacement of existing park assets that have reached the end of their useful life. So key components of the relevant parks project lists, items that we can use in an SDC calculation is capital projects that add capacity, including acquisition of park land and upgrades to existing park land. So you've got a lot of, or at least 10, 12 acres of open space. We could maybe convert that to, or develop a park land that has a lot more amenities on it. That would be an SDC eligible project, for instance. Park planning efforts and other sorts of efforts, they don't count for this because it's not considered capital. But that's not a big cost area anyway. Should be a robust list that looks out over a 20-year time frame. I mean, it can be anywhere from 6 to 20, but big range. We're looking, I think, probably at the larger range there. Must be added. Projects can be added later, but crucially, the SDC, the maximum defensible SDC that we calculate, can't go above that maximum defensible level. So if you add projects, it's going to further dilute what can be funded and what can't. And projects with public support are obviously encouraged, and that's why we're here tonight. Public Works will help us with the details, but what we want from you is a sense for what the future looks like in Canby.
And sorry to interrupt.
Go ahead.
So this slide I had made because I was looking at what the master plan actually showed for priorities, and it really emphasized things that the fact that the master plan has a lot of things that aren't SDC eligible. So I was kind of trying to sort them into buckets of things that are eligible and not, and Tim can correct me if my assumptions are wrong. But the master plan talked about things like doing a master plan for Wake Park, which is more planning, doing a trails master plan, which is more planning. Those don't really directly add capacity as capital projects. Also, our master plan really advocates for a lot of things that we are missing and we still want to do, and there's still priorities in the master plan, like recreational programs or hiring a recreational director. But like Tim said, those aren't funded through this particular financial mechanism. But there are things in there that in the master plan that are SDC eligible, or at least partially eligible. So examples were the dog park, new playgrounds, swim center upgrades. I guess you would have to prove that those add capacity. But like the pedal park that we've talked about, that's a new facility. So the master plan right now kind of has a range of things that are eligible and not eligible. So this exercise that we're doing tonight is really focusing on the capital projects.
Great context. And as an example, this is from a project that we did in Camas, Washington, so I know that this isn't, none of these names will look familiar to you, but just to give you a sense and to illustrate sort of how this looks when we're calculating it. So notice the second from the right column there, it says impact fee eligibility. So that's the percentage of the project cost that we can sort of pay through SDCs. So in this instance, we've got the Ledbetter House redevelopment. We're arguing in this case that there is capacity that's being added in the sense that this asset is close to the end of its useful life. And without that redevelopment, it won't be useful anymore. But because it's not really adding new capacity, it's only eligible to the extent that growth would pay for it, right? So in this case, over the time frame that we were planning, the population at the end of that time frame, basically 23.56% of that was new. So all the rest, those are existing residents of Camas.
And maybe just some context, so the Ledbetter House owned by the city of Camas and on Lacamas Lake, essentially right across the road from Lacamas Lake. So just, that would be part of maybe the piece that's help understand this a bit better. So it's not just a historic structure, but
right,
but it could be used by the public.
Right.
So,
it's a park asset, I think that's where they hold their parks. Lacamas Heights Park, on the other hand, brand new park, so 100% eligible, the whole cost, we can throw that into the SDC calculation. Aquatic center maintenance, really expensive, as you can tell, 0% eligible, because we're not really adding any capacity, it's just ongoing maintenance.
So you had mentioned that on the Ledbetter House, that you're arguing that this is the capacity that we're gonna gain in it. So I guess, who starts the argument, and then who are you arguing against that may not say you're not getting that full amount?
That's a very good question. So I think
I should reapply.
David Petting on that.
Yeah.
So I think sort of in concert, city staff and we would make the argument around what is growth share eligible, so that 23%, 100% eligible and 0% eligible. The person who would make that argument would be developers or other people who might object to the implementation of this SDC. It's typically the Home Builders Association, but it can be residents too. But often they're the ones with the folks who are paid to be there to oppose this stuff. So it's basically, they would look through this project list and say, well, how is that really adding capacity? And they could make those arguments and bring that into the public eye. So that's where it gets difficult.
So for us, I would think like we had Wake Park, we had couldn't do the planning, but then you had Wake Park construction or the remodel of that. I guess, would that be a percentage? Like would that be like 25% we could use SDCs? And I guess, are there people when we say, yeah, we're gonna use 25% SDCs? Is there groups, is like the home builders, are they coming in and looking at these projects? I guess I wasn't aware that we had groups that come in and said, who's using these SDC monies? I thought it was always just a city saying that doesn't sound like a very good idea, doing that.
I think it's crucial for the city to be diligent in assigning eligibility, right? Because
sure,
it's legal jeopardy if they're playing too fast and loose with it, right?
And those groups might not be giving you input on the day-to-day implementation, but when you're adopting your methodology is when they're gonna come in and comment, right?
Right, so there's a process, and I'll get into the weeds here really quickly, sorry about this.
Because the methodology is gonna go through hearings at city council.
but
where
once
we
it's
adopt it.
through the hearings, then it's just basically up to the city to say, we think this is good enough. And then,
Well, yes.
and then nobody comes back and says, hey, wait a minute.
It typically, so the way it works is we issue a 90-day notice to say, hey, we're gonna have a public hearing in the next 90 days to update our parks SDC, for instance. And then at the 60-day mark, we have to provide a draft methodology report, which goes through all of our assumptions and all of the different details that go with the calculation. At that point, people who want to object can read through that methodology report and identify any issues. The way that comes up, I mean, it's all sorts of ways. They'll email staff before we get to the public hearing. They might show up to the public hearing, but that's the way that typically goes. It's very rare that happens, and at least in our instance, because we're pretty diligent, we're pretty conservative in the way that we dole out eligibility.
Does that all go through then the planning department?
It does, and so that would be, basically, the city council has the authority over the zoning planning commission. We probably will get some commentary, because you can see on the SDC chart, we're kind of at the bottom of that list, and we're probably gonna be more in the middle. We raised our permit fees, and just as an example there, we got Downland Friends of Oregon and the Home Builders Association of Oregon both contacted me that was 2 years ago. This will likely raise that as well. Now, that doesn't mean that those people are gonna show up and have any kind of merit to the discussion, but I think really thematically, we wanna take advantage of all the resources we can get, not just for parks, but for roads. And those are the two big ones, storm and sewer are important too, but those, the big expenses are parks and roads. And so this is a way of maybe doing that. We wanna lean on FCS because they are the experts, and so if someone wanted to take this and challenge us, these guys would be testifying. That's why we have consultants here. It's pretty complicated stuff. But I think that this is an opportunity to maybe reopen and examine some things that we've historically not addressed with SDCs before, and trying to look at them a little more in detail than I think previously the city did. So, great. Thank you.
So the next concept I'll introduce to you is the level of service analysis. And this is pretty unique to parks. And sorry, this is very small, that table. But go through the really basic concept of level of service. In almost every parks utility, level of service is defined as acres per 1,000 residents. So this is an example from Camas. I do have a good example for Canopy here in the next slide, but this is the way that we would calculate this for you once we completed the project list. So you kind of calculate the existing level of service, acres per 1,000 and miles of trail per 1,000 residents. And that will determine eligibility. And I'll just skip over to the next slide because this is more Canopy related. So thanks Ryan, because he did a really good job of putting together your existing inventory. So these top 3 cells here show your developed park acres, that's 64.2 acres, open space acres, 42.6 acres, and then developed miles of trail, 5.19 miles in that case. Your 2025 population is 19,486. And so you divide that by 1,000 and then you determine the acres or miles of trail per 1,000. So yes.
So is that developed park acres usable space or areas that we can't use, like the nature park?
Developed as, Locust, Wake Park, Community Park. The open space was more Eco Park, and then Willamette Wayside, and Three Sisters property, and then
So the open space is area that we cannot use because we've already tried that with Eco Park for the sports complex. So would we back that out?
I mean, I don't know if
We're well under the 1,000.
What's the national average?
We're under the national average. Well,
That's a good question.
That would come into play on what our rates would be too. Because if we can't develop that, then we should have that listed in as the open space. You follow me?
but doesn't including those parks help?
Yes.
Yeah, it helps
helps.
because it's boosting your level of service that you're gonna try to keep matching. If you start pulling pieces out, then right?
It would lower your overall level of service, which would show that you need less to address the needs of the future. So, and I'll walk through that a little bit with this second table down here. So
before you, sorry, get Pepper's questions,
yeah,
but
no, please.
I think part of this is maybe focus on the level of service for where we're at now.
Yes.
And for council, ultimately, it's gonna come down to what is the metric? Are we gonna go with 10 acres per 1,000? Is it less than that? And is it for everything, for development, open space? And there is some discretion, Jim, on this for council to make some of these calls on, you know, this is part of why we're having the discussion as well. So we're just trying to educate at this point and get the consensus of the parks advisory.
So based on these three metrics of level of service, we'll calculate what we need to address future need over the next 20 years. So 2025 population, as we've established, 19,468. 2045 population projected is 25,399, a difference of 5,931, right? So basically, we need 5.3931 times all of these factors, and that's how we get this. So based on your existing level of service, we would have 19.5 acres of developed park, 13 acres of open space, and 1.6 miles of trails that would be 100% SDC eligible. So basically, we can collect enough money to build those things.
And that's based on a 3.29 level service, right, per thousand.
For developed acres, so that 19.5 is just that 5,931 divided by 1,000 times that 3.29. So each of these three, sorry, I know that's a lot of numbers, I'm sorry guys. 19.5 is, so this, which is basically 5.931 times 3.29. That's how we get to 19.5. To get to the 13, it's that same 5.931 times 2.19. And then that 1.6 miles of trail is 5.
And just, but if we stuck with, the question is, as you move forward, I'm sorry, jumping in, but this is the metric right now currently.
Correct.
Baseline current standard, okay.
It is one way that we would calculate your level of service and therefore your eligible parking.
Aren't we underserving the citizens that can be, but we're well under the national average?
Yes.
We don't disagree with that at all, it's just this is the starting place, and then what do we want to do?
So we have basically two ways of calculating your SDC eligibility. This is the one that we I think historically we would have gone with this, but in the last 10 years or so, we've moved to what's called a future level of service calculation that's based more on what your project list and what your park system looks like in 2045 in this case. So basically, let's say that Canby aspires to add another 50 acres of developed parkland. Well, then we would judge the level of service that we could calculate that SDC on based on the future, based on the level of service that's provided in 2045. So that's it's a complicated way of getting there, but once we have this project list nailed down, we can calculate a future level of service that I think will probably provide a much better park system in 2045. I mean, a more abundant, I guess, park system in 2045.
And you have graphs of that, right, Tim? You're gonna get to those.
Yes, I'll get to this, which is sort of the policy level of service discussion, where we're looking at 10 acres of developed parkland per 1,000 instead of that 3.29 we were looking at in the last slide. So in that case, then we're looking at a policy need for developed parkland of 59.3 acres to meet the need of the future. And so compare that to 19.5.
And that's what we get, 10 acres per thousand.
10 acres per thousand,
Versus
policy level of service
3.29.
that we've established through the Parks Master Plan and other master planning efforts. So that's why this is so crucial. That's why getting this project list nailed down and have your blessing on it is crucial. Once we have that, we can calculate a level of service for the future that will allow you to collect more in SDCs and therefore fund more of your SDC or more of your parks projects with SDC. So, and I guess I'll go back really quickly to this example in Canvas. So sorry again that we're looking at such a small table, but you can see in this case, right, this is the current level of service. So the one that I showed you first, where only 18% of their trail projects are eligible for the SDC in the current level of service. But when we look at the future level of service, that jumps up to 37.49, because when we're looking into the future, the trail system is much more robust. So I don't know if I'm doing a good job of explaining, but that's where we really this project list in order to make these calculations work.
Does the city run into trouble if they are getting towards the end of the lifespan of the study and they haven't gotten closer to that future level of service and they haven't built enough parks and?
I've never heard any city get in trouble with that, because the thing is, you can't control the amount of development that happens over 20 years, right? I mean, this is all just a snapshot and our best attempt to plan the next 20 years, but you know, let's say that there's a home building crisis and we just don't build anything for 20 years. I mean, you can't be held liable for that, so.
That acreage of parks, does it have to be within the city limits, or can it be outside? So there's very limited land inside the city limit for parks. As it stands right now.
And so that's something that Don has been talking about, I think, with DLCD quite a bit around helping to sort of backfill this deficit that the city has right now between this policy level of service of 10 acres per 1,000 and the existing 3.3 acres per 1,000 that we have. So in that UGB expansion discussion, we're saying, hey, look, we have a pretty significant deficit here. Let us expand more and bring that in. And I think maybe not within the city boundary, but within the city service area, I think that's definitely a must.
Maybe just to add and then just to focus this back, I think part of this is really up to the city on the urban growth boundary piece related to parks, but a big part of that is how does this get financed? So how does it get financed? And that's the other piece of this. Tim, I think what might be helpful, maybe you're gonna get to this, but like the list and then how that relates to acreage that then formulates into the level of service, that might be a good piece to focus on.
But I can pull that up. I don't have that in this slideshow.
But no, I'm just saying the concept, yeah, I think that we're throwing around acreages per 1,000, I think.
Right,
The list piece that we talked about earlier or today about the building the list and then having acreages associated with that, and then having a level of service that comes out of that is, I think, an appropriate way of a starting point for what is truly the level of service. And that gives the committee the ability to set the list, set the acreage, and set the level of service. And then we can talk about how much additional acreage, if that's something that is needed for modifying the list.
Right, so I think, were you talking about the table that Todd provided with the calculation of what the city needs in the future?
That kind of ties into it, yeah.
Okay, so I think that's still this. This is the sort of the future looking. So basically, this shows that the city would want to formulate a parks list that brings in 73 acres of parks, and then 1.6, although again, we could set a standard that's higher through the parks list. So basically, what the parks project list will do is give us a sense for how many acres, how many miles of trail that we're adding. And with that information, we would add that to the existing parks inventory here. So this stuff, add that together and make the future looking level of service. That's the calculation.
So is it acre based or kind of project based? Does that make sense? Like if we said, hey, we want a new pool and a new community center and a new this, that's gonna be X amount of dollars versus that's 1 acre. So
right. So the project list would include each of the projects and include acres in it. And like it's also a cost component as well. So you're getting kind of all of that information together. So what the project list would typically look like is you're kind of enumerating these projects, and they can be pretty vague, right? We could say neighborhood park, 3 acres, X cost based on input from public works, and you list off as many as we think we need to kind of get to where we want to be in 20 years. And same thing with other open space projects, trails, that kind of thing.
So what I'm getting is we're trying to when we we get this list together, it's gonna have 20 projects, whatever it is, and it's gonna be acres and costs. And so when you get that final cost, you're gonna say, here's our argument to raise our SDC funds because we're gonna need X amount of dollars, 20 years to pay for all this stuff. So here's our argument, and then somebody else is gonna have to. All
Exactly.
builders are gonna have to come and say, thanks, but no thanks. No thanks.
Not coming to camp.
So is that kind of the methodology? on this?
Precisely,
Okay.
yes, that's exactly
And
that.
out of that comes this level of service piece that like, what is that final number, which council will end up having to approve? And so that would be, as part of the SDC, we'll do this for transportation as well, doing identically the same thing, list of projects over the next 20 years, and then that level of service really is the same kind of equation. And then council would adopt that as part of the system development charges. So it's important, the list is really important because it does start to get to level of service, and then that can be looked at again. If you all say, we still don't think it's enough, then what else should you add to the list? So that's part of the process.
Well, then conversely, if your list had a bunch of really little things and weren't getting you anywhere near the acreage in this table, then you couldn't support raising the SDC to the level that we're contemplating.
Exactly.
And so it emphasizes the fact that we should be, even if we don't know the exact number of acres that X, Y, and Z projects have, we should be thinking about projects that would take up some acreage so that we can get those on the list.
Right. And at this point, it's conceptual, really, right? So, we don't know what a community park in the new area, in the new community expansion area is gonna look like exactly. We couldn't say it's, 23.5 acres, right? It's sort of, we're ballparking it to get to the point where we have a list that we can use to sort of say, this is what the city needs in the next 20 years. So the ask tonight, I think, is to just sort of help us sort of enumerate those projects, think about what sort of level of service we want to achieve. How do we get to a project list that gives us close to 70 acres? Or, and do we want to exceed that? To your point, how much more do we want to provide for future residents? And this is sort of that starting point where we can start to collect that money and build that infrastructure out.
And Tim, some of this is premised on back to the earlier question about some of the acreage for parks would end up being in the boundary expansion area based on this formula, right? So we are assuming that. So we would do all the urban growth boundary process, and then we would essentially adopt that system development charge that would apply to that area, but we're already kind of pre-planning that to that extent. So 72 acres, although it may not fit into the city now, there are pieces of this that are assumed to be in the boundary expansion area, both the industrial problem area, possibly on the east side, and wherever else we have residential, could be in the northwest side of the city. Those could be mixed in. And so part of this, as well as this urban growth boundary process, is mixed in with about 440 acres of industrial need and about 73 acres of residential need. So this is going to play into the next level in our work, which is concept planning. We'll do an urban growth boundary initiation first of what the boundary is. We want the park information first on the acreage. We can do an urban growth boundary initiation process on the boundary. Then we're going to go into concept planning. We have a grant from ODOT to do that. That concept planning will lay out where industrial and residential, and even park areas would be conceptually located. So this is a lot to kind of throw out here in this meeting, but going back to the list, I think that really is the driver of the list, cost and acreage to get to a level of service. That's the first part. Our hope is that the next park advisory meeting is on May 20th. We're hoping to have a work session with council the next night on May 21st and to talk about the boundary expansion need issue. I'd like to get some consensus from council on this so we can move the urban growth boundary process further along and also the SDC process along.
To me, if you want to attract more people moving into the city, you need to have a robust park system for the citizens. you're gonna need citizens to move to wherever there's activities for their kids and family growing.
How does the, obviously, if you did the full Monty deal of 60 acres, whatever it is, 20 years, how does the city keep up with parks maintenance? Obviously, there's not, so how, I mean, is there a little cat and mouse going on with, here's what you want, but here's what you can afford, because you can't maintain what you guys.
That's definitely a very important consideration. This doesn't really address that, right? I mean, I think it is an interesting thing to kind of add on, but you know, at that point, I think it's a priority for council, they probably budget for it, but, you know, you can look at parks utility fees and other sorts of, you know, maintenance stuff, maintenance connections.
And over a 20-year period, I mean, there, you know, again, we're not sure what this looks like, but, great question. I mean, you know, there's a park district that's floated around for, I mean, system development charges, you know, are not gonna really pay for maintenance, but would there be the concept that there could be a park district created or other revenue sources that come in? Now, again, I think it's a huge question that you're asking, which is another balancing point, which is, you can reach for the sky according to the Department of Land Conservation and Development. You know, some other communities have done that, Benville has done that, and I'm not sure how they're gonna pay for all their parks, but they passed the test for their boundary and they added a ton of land in there. I think there is a template here. What we'd like the boundary discussion to be is, to some degree, what can we afford? I mean, there's some of that element in truthing this out so that we don't end up with conceptual parkland area that's gobbled up by industrial development because we didn't have the mechanism and the financial tools to take that and develop it as parkland. So there's definitely a balance here on that. But I think dreaming that the list should be as with that's really the starting point. And I know we're probably not going to get to a list tonight, but the action item I think is really, you know, for hopefully this group, this board to come up with that. And so that would give us the advice that we would need going forward to go to council, and then the council would say, yeah, we're on board with that. And then we move the boundary discussion forward as well as the SDC discussion.
And another thing I'll add to that really quickly is, you know, as these things get built, they're ideally being built with SDC money, right? And that money is coming from construction of housing and, you know, other, if you want to stick your employers with it, construction of employment land as well. And all of that will result in higher property taxes too, right? Or property tax incomes for the city. So theoretically, this mechanism sort of constrains your ability to build until you have the underlying tax base to sort of fund.
So this is kind of the opposite. If you build it, they will come. You have to wait till they come before you build it.
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, if we've got let's say we've got a $60 million project list at the end of the day, and you know, 80% of that is SDC eligible. I'm just picking numbers out of the air. Don't quote me on any of that, but you know that you're getting 80% of your capital funds from that. So I mean, really, it's.
But you wouldn't generate that, it would take a long time to generate up to that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I mean, and of course, that would be a project by project basis, right? So you'd say, okay, we've got enough in the SDC fund to build this thing, we'll build it. Hopefully we've got enough to maintain it.
So one last question. So I don't know, a year ago or so, we did that urban growth boundary where we had all those meetings. And so how long, is that a 20-year plan on that? Is that what that was?
That was the vision for the community, and so that information will then, the next step is after we decide on the acreage for parks, we'll invite you all back again and concept planning. We're gonna actually show locations of where those might be. You know, that input that was provided will be a guiding post, but that was not a decision, a situation. There's more information that has to be evaluated on that, and that's again another public layer of like community involvement, city council involvement on that, but that would end up kind of landing those spots where parks might conceptually be located in the concept planning work that we do. So the step one is acreage based on the plan, that parks plan, 20-year plan, and then boundary initiation, which has the acreage in it for all three areas, which should be residential, employment, and parks. And then over the next several years or a year and a half, concept planning will happen, what's important though is that we have financial mechanisms to be able to execute those areas that are identified as parks. Otherwise, they will be consumed by other development like industrial or residential.
So we'll just briefly touch on next steps. Complete the project list. That's the big next step that we've got. We've got all these other activities that we'll be doing, council discussion, as Don mentioned. The requirement that we talked about earlier, done 90 days and then 60 days before the first hearing, we have to have the draft methodology report available to the public. Input from stakeholders, including home builders. I mean, that's typically where we do some outreach, and especially given how, as we're expanding the road boundary here, home builders will certainly be interested. So having those discussions early, that'll be crucial. And then city council work sessions around this topic, refinement based on those conversations, and then adoption of the SDC.
There'll be another work session with council on June 4th on SDCs in particular, and that is all kind of building on itself. So that'll be the next system development charge work session. Before that, May 21st, again, hoping to be able to talk with council at work session about having my hope is we have the list and we have the acreages, and we can talk to council about that on the 21st. And you all will be meeting again on May 20th. So I'm not sure how this all gets done, and there's a lot to put the list together, Barry, and I think that's the action.
That's the last one.
Yes, it is.
Last Kathy.
I have some questions, and if they're too ignorant, then we can just pass by them. So as I understand it, the SDCs are the funds that are used for once something is allocated to be a park, that will be what was used for developing it, it's not used for the acquisition of the property, correct?
We could use it for acquisition property too, yeah.
Okay, couple of things, I'm not familiar with what the projected plans of expansion are, but I look at something like, for instance, in Portland, you've got Forest Park.
Yeah.
And you've got the Rose Gardens and the Japanese Garden, and it's all kind of integrated so that you can take trails and go. And I think that was really a wise decision, because if you look at someplace like, for instance, I grew up in Orange County in Southern California, and it is so overdeveloped, and it's just gridlock and concrete and, an occasional tree here and there. And one of the reasons that brought me back up here, I was born in this state, is, being able to get out in nature, walk a forest path, see the rivers flow and all of that kind of thing. And I think that it's really valuable to have the parks where we've got the fields for the sports teams and things like that. But just my personal opinion is, if we're going to be looking at expansion and acreage acquisition, I'd like to see as much allocated to green space, whether it's natural pathways, more parks that are designated for specific use, whether it's pickleball or sports teams, that kind of thing. But I really love the idea of having as much possible green space factored in going forward, because once it's, subdivided, it's
right.
And I've lived through over congestion and gridlock, which is part of what brought me up here. Even now I'll go to the park and I'll see, lots of greenery, and you can see the river rolling by, and you just sit there and enjoy breathing in fresh air. And part of that fresh air and the quality of life we have up here and the reduced stress levels is, I think, being able to be out in nature, get into those green spaces. So that's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, that's a really good observation. And land acquisition, that should be definitely a big component of this project list, especially because it's just, the GB expands, want to get on top of that as fast as possible.
I want to throw out a couple of locations, if I can. Okay. The Canby utility property down along the Malala River police station, it's 59 acres. And we looked at it for development of a possible soccer complex at one time. They passed on that because it was in the 100-year floodplain, but that doesn't mean you can't use it for other things, you know, developing it into a green space, walking trails, or some pickleball courts or whatever down there. I mean, sure. Also, next to that is the 13 acres of the Honda pits that we've talked about for the pedal park. The pedal skate park, similar to what they just put in Sandy, Oregon, and they went through their Parks SDC methodology at the same time we did ours, in 2022, so that's another area. I know the schools are hurting with money. The Ackerman project that we started in 2018, that's like 25 acres of school property that they're in need of. They're in need of money, just like our city is, and potentially, you know, purchasing that if it's available. I mean, the school could be used as a community center. The property could be developed into a sports complex as we had before. So those are my three.
Is it hard to defend a project that we don't control the property?
Yes, so the complication with using schools as parkland or, you know, using SDCs to fund parks through the context of the school is that your eligibility percentage decreases pretty significantly because during school hours, you wouldn't be able to use, at least a regular citizen wouldn't be able to use the park, right? So you have to reduce that, the eligibility of that project further because there's stretch of time.
Are you talking about leasing it from the property or buying it from the school? Because once you buy it, it's yours, right?
And if you ran it in such a way that it wasn't school related at all anymore, and that it would be 100% for the use of residents, it can be, if not without context of school,
Right.
yes, that would be eligible. And even in the context of the school, it would be eligible. It's just it's reduced pretty significantly because it's a school.
Barry, to your point, that's another factor that in this equation on how much acreage is being asked is the school discussion. And it ranges from everything you're talking about, which is acquisition, to being able to use it informally at the schools or operational hours. This not necessarily on SDCs, but on the acreage boundary expansion issue. And there is a meeting being set up to discuss those specifics with the school district now on this discussion. So, because we know that they're having some challenges, and I think there's a new regime, so to speak, at the school, and it's an opportunity to have a refresh on some of those discussions about, you know, usability of their properties, et cetera. What is that now? Is it, what limitations are there now? Are there opportunities where there could be, where the school's interested in maybe selling property to leasing property? So, but the range, the spectrum, go back to Tim's point about the eligibility on, you know, the SDC part, vary depending on those circumstances. So that's part of the equation.
So I'd like to echo some of the stuff Kathy was saying, that I'd like to see more green spaces, more environmental and wildlife sort of spots. Is it called Redwood Landing down there, that canyon thing? When I first got on the board, went around and looked at all the different parks, and the person that I was with, and we stood there and looked down and we saw all kinds of wildlife while we're standing there. And while it's really undevelopable as far as it's just a canyon, like a wildlife observation platform being built there could really enhance the usage, actually make it usable. So to me, that sounds like it might qualify for at least partial funds.
Yeah.
I also am interested in the property that Barry talked about that's down there by the railroad trestle and all of that. I would love to see that you know, dedicated as some sort of a nature area. But we could also incorporate some trails. My understanding is that it goes back over to the Knightsbridge Park. Somehow maybe a trail could be, you know, so that could add to a trail system there. And then the Wayside property over here, you know, I know we're very limited on what we can do over there, but I think it sounds to me from my recollection that nature sort of, you know, develop, right now, our plan is to just mow it down every summer, which is not good for, you know, any of the little critters or the birds of prey, not inviting for anybody to come and habitate or use that as a habitat. So if we planted it, native plantings and trees and really developed that as just a, you know, and then with trails through it for people to use, again, another nature, open space, environmentally, you know, so much of the wildlife was displaced when redwood was developed. I know I've talked to people who have said, I never see deer anymore, and you know, that kind of thing. So those were my suggestions.
That Willamette Wayside is like 89 acres, and has that been determined that you can't do anything there? I mean,
No, the master plan talked about those types of amenities. That 2004 Willamette Wayside plan talked about that kind of stuff.
because people have talked, discussion, river access, maybe kayak rentals or whatever. Kind of accessibility.
So that's already in our park list, correct?
What's that?
Wayside, that's already in our park.
It's on the part, yeah, it's on the part.
But I don't know, as far as SECs, I don't know how much you get out of, I don't know, the capacity, if you're talking, it's already on our list, or it's already ours, correct?
But if you're adding an amenity where there isn't one at all, then I feel like it would be.
Yeah, how developed is this property?
It's just open space.
So yeah, if you were to say, build it out as a develop, you know, whatever you're doing.
Yeah, it can't be like a park, and we can't run a bunch of urban utilities to it, but it could have trails and a kayak launch or something.
Oh, yeah, then yeah, that would,
And that would be,
Because you're
you pay
basically-
for that with SDC?
yeah,
Even though it's in the county.
well, as long as it's inside of these.
Well, it's not a UGB.
Oh.
Yeah, but it could, but the UGB is being changed.
Yeah,
Currently.
This is tricky because it's rural reserve and this happened in 2010 when these boundaries were established. And so we can't technically take it into our boundary.
Right, if it's rural reserve.
It's rural reserve. It's a legislative issue. I mean, we would have to have a legislature change that. It's a bit unfortunate for the city because it makes the usability of that property, well, at least from an SDC perspective, I think from a nature perspective, we'd be dealing with more general funds than we would be like using assisted development terms.
But I would think that, you know, planting trees and native plantings and those types of things would be far less expensive than like the, you know, the playground that we just built or are building.
Wouldn't take much. I'll look into that, because that's a pretty,
If there's a way to do that, Tim, that would be awesome. I mean, even though it's not, I mean, does it need, we own it, the city owns it. It's a bit odd, and we own it, but it's,
And there's no parking. So you have a parking issue with it.
so.
A lot of people walk to it.
It would take care of that whole neighborhood area though, that can reach in.
and
There's a big area that.
And back to Jim's point, there would be permitting through the county, but I think if it was minimal footprint, I think they would allow that, Jim, to your point. I mean, if you were to make it, like, it's not gonna be with utilities and paving it over, but there could be some improvements down there.
Yeah, I'll look at it, because that's a really esoteric question. This is where I'm learning, so I'll reach out to some folks.
So it sounds like we need a list of 1 to 20, is that what or what do we?
20 years.
20 years, so what, I know we can kind of go around here and say,
Well, no.
how do we get together a
Back
comprehensive
in-
list?
When we did the master plan back in 2022, right? I mean, we developed the city council staff report. I mean, we still have that. I don't know why we need to reinvent. the
Because
wheel.
most of that is not SDC eligible. If it's on that
Okay,
list right there, it's programming and master planning and hiring a recreation director, a lot of that,
Okay,
it was on Scott Archer's table.
right.
And so, but I think, like I said on that one slide, I think there's some stuff in there, a dog park. There's analysis in the master plan about playground deficiency. Some areas don't have enough access to a playground. So stuff like that, that's capital projects, I think should be carried from the master plan
Well, that-
to the list.
Question to, we had the presentation at council where we can annually, if we want to update the master plan project list. And that has to come to council to be changed. So if there's items that's in the current master plan, and this group recommends either adding something or deleting something out of that, then that comes to council. So you got twofold here. One is the master plan projects, are you happy with that? Because then those have to be incorporated into the 20-year plan.
Well, the master plan projects would be our 5-year CIP, right? I mean, those projects that we.
Well, and I think, yeah, the master plan's always gonna have things that aren't SDC eligible, because that's still part of the park planning.
But I'm talking.
But the FCS has told us that we don't have to update the parks master plan if we don't want to, every time we do something like this.
If you don't want to, but if you want to add a pedal park, you have to update the list.
Through this process, so part of this process includes.
But in the master plan, adding it to the master plan.
Sure, yeah, I think that's probably a separate process, but through this process, we could adopt a standalone SDC project list. That could, so it's, if we make massive changes to it, we can adopt that through this process.
You could add a pedal park to this list and it would be SDC eligible without amending our master plan.
Correct, yes, because part of the process would be adopting a project list.
It seems a bit disjointed, but that is what we heard, and we've actually talked to council, legal counsel about that too, Jim.
If you can add a pedal park to this list without amending the master plan, is what he's saying. So you can put it on this 20-year list, it makes it SDC eligible.
It's on the CIP, so why does it have to be on the master plan as well?
Well, and that's a shorter list, that CIP is a much shorter list, but I mean, we want a robust, longer, they may overlap.
Yeah, but if you're limited to the capital projects that are on the master plan, you're not gonna be able to raise your fee much.
Yeah.
Because that's not enough to
Level of service.
support that level of service.
But it doesn't have to be, the pedal park doesn't have to be on the master plan.
To be a part of the SDC calculation? No.
So we're gonna adopt that as part, this list is gonna be adopted as part of this new SDC, so this is the wish list here, and we're asking, let's put the pedal park on there. I mean, like that's, we need to add it right now.
That's a project.
Yeah.
Cause if we were limited to what's on the master plan right now, this would be a dead end conversation, because we would just.
Your SDC would decrease.
Don,
Yeah.
could you clarify that, please, because that's not what I heard the consultant tell us.
Okay.
That we had to actually change the master plan project list in order to be eligible for SDCs.
I'll confirm, Jim.
Yeah, thank
We've, checked with, Josh Sober as well, Barry Elster, but that was what our understanding was, but I will confirm it.
So could we just say we want 50 acres of land for ball fields? Not knowing that we don't have that in the city now, and put that on the list?
Good.
Yeah.
And ditto for nature trails.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just, my feeling is let's push it as far as we can, punch it up, because it's easier, I think, to scale back than try and chase it and acquire sort of after the fact.
Where does a dog park fall into all this?
You could
Is that-
go about that a number of ways. One, you could add that to an existing park, and that would be eligible maybe by gross share or maybe 100%. Or you could say, we're building a brand new dog park, it's 2 acres,
That could be part of that
and that's part of it.
SDC. Cause what's the plan right now for the dog park? I don't know if that's been kicked around, seems like.
It's going into this 26 budget.
So it will not be part of the SDC then?
Yeah, it's SDC eligible
Okay.
because it's a local park.
Alright,
As long as you haven't broken ground on a project, it's SDC eligible.
So that can go on the list.
We could put a second one in though if we wanted also.
Want
If you
to,
guys are butting this thing up.
Either side of town, if you want 2 dog parks, we can throw two dog parks.
Why not 3?
Well, it helps us be ready for opportunity that might come, right, Don?
Yeah, and that's part of what I think this is, I mean, to get the funding, I mean, ultimately, I think we probably do want to update the master plan, Parks Master Plan, but again, Jim will confirm this, but our understanding is, like Hillsborough is doing it yearly, they're updating their list yearly, and it's not necessarily consistent with their, master plan, so, yeah.
So what about, instead of identifying specific pieces of land or acreage, an idea like we want river access for the future? And that's just kind of, because that would be expensive.
Right.
But we haven't identified a piece of property at some point.
Yeah, I mean, I think it has to pass a certain straight face test. You know, with respect to acreage, with respect to costs and feasibility, right? I mean, so, but yeah, I mean, you could add that.
After we get done with the SDCs for conversation.
We'll have public input after that.
So the moral dilemma here is basically you can shoot for the moon in half an hour, but that's gonna jack your SDCs way up, and then you run into builder, or then people are not gonna wanna come here because they don't wanna build here,
Yes.
right? I mean, that's kind of you gotta have weighed that.
Right.
So jumping ahead to implementation, you have, council has the option to reduce the charge, right? So we will calculate your maximum defensible charge. Let's say that it's $30,000 per single family detached. Let's say council says, that's too high, we want it to be 15,000. Totally possible, no problem. It just reduces the amount of capital you're bringing in to fund these projects. So that's one thing. Another thing is when you develop this list, it's enormous, and you've got this gap between your existing level of service and your future level of service. There is a deficit, and as that project list gets bigger and bigger and bigger, that deficit grows larger and larger and larger, and that deficit can't be funded through SDCs. So the bigger the project list becomes, the more projects you can theoretically fund, but the less that capital cost can be included in the SDC calculation.
So I guess, without getting too far in the weeds here, I mean, Canby's kind of seen a change over the last 10, 15 years where it's gone from kind of a younger community, kids, and now we're seeing our schools flat. And I don't know what the next 20 years, if that's projected anywhere into this stuff. So I guess that's part of the dilemma is that part of this SDC driven where it's just too expensive to live in Canby or build in Canby and live here if you have kids. And so then what are those parks? Are we now shooting for more adult parks? Right? I mean, so there's a lot of complexity to this situation of do other communities just say, we're just gonna jump wall it and say, yeah, we think it's gonna come back, or is there is there science to this?
I mean, okay, so we'll go to the 20-year population growth projection, right? That's kind of what's driving this. I mean, that's the way the city is planning around housing, right? We're planning on housing all of these people, and that's part of the reason the EGB is expanding this, is that we're kind of up against it. We don't really have all that much room to grow out. So I think that's probably one of the complications that you're dealing with. And again, there's this sort of self-enforcing component to this where you're only going to get as much capital as you have construction, right? It's completely determined by your construction, your private sector construction. So, and as that capital comes in, the city makes the call about which one of these projects it's going to fund. So let's say in 10 years, the city's got a whole bunch of money in their SDC kitty for parks, and it turns out that there's not that many kids anymore. So yeah, we're kind of edging more towards that, like wildlife or bike trails for folks. Yeah. So it's a decision that the city could make well off in the future based on what's happening then. Okay. So yeah, this is
I think that it's a really great question you're asking. Trends, I mean, I think some of this is the housing market piece. I mean, it's not looking great with all the inflationary stuff that's there now, but there will be, I think, different product types being built for houses, smaller houses on smaller lots, which was not really allowed previously, and now is going to be allowed. Interest rates are such a challenge right now, and so are supplies, which I mean, cost of materials are, it's a big question mark right now, but I don't think it's gonna completely nosedive. I mean, I believe that we're still gonna attract younger folks here, families, which would be the goal, but that's part of what this dynamic of providing the opportunity for that as part of the comp plan and the boundary expansion that we're doing is providing some of those opportunities, but it's gonna have to be a market force change too. Right now, there's not a whole lot going on residentially at all. There's some, but it's minimal because it's just so expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I do think, Tim, you're right. I mean, we can calibrate this. It doesn't need to be like set in stone. Sure. Calibrate that. Yeah.
So again, our goal would be to create this 20-year project list. And have that documented. I mean, we need to get on the 20th. Everybody went home, put an email, send it to me of things that you would like to see in the next 20 years, I will summarize it, put it on a list, and we'll talk about it again on the 20th, the next time we meet. Is that something that's doable? I mean,
How do you quantify, like we say community center, like is that 1 acre? I mean, so I'm trying to piece together land acquisition versus some other these capital things, and how does that piece? Because things are usually bigger because now you need parking and all that, so is that
I think the input that you could give as much as you knew, and if there were open questions like that, Jerry and his team could kind of refine it, like how many acres they think that whatever you're talking about might be.
whatever a community center size would be, yeah. I hate to keep going back on that. There may be an empty school here that is gonna be available. I mean, some of these elementary schools might be, we just don't know. But if there was an elementary school that came available, like Knight School, Chapman School, Lee School, Akron School, buildings already there, we could maybe acquire that and make it into a community center, because you've got a gymnasium, you've got a kitchen, you've got some of the things that you need, you just repurpose it.
Yeah, well, it sounds like we'll know if you're meeting with the school district shortly,
Right.
what they're, I mean.
That has not been set up as near term. I think I'll know by the 20th what that, the general consensus is, and obviously selling off public property, it's complicated to some degree, but that would be something that they may be open to. I know Acromet, they reached out to us and said, can we keep our conditional use permit going, even though there won't be activity at the school, and there's other things that are going on there. So it is kind of a community center, really, by its nature, but I know that there are struggling things and they're a bit behind. So, like Washington went through the same thing, and a ton of teachers got laid off last year, and that's a cycle this year in Oregon is happening. And I think again, it's flat. I agree, and I think there's an opportunity here for that. I don't think all the schools are going to go away quickly, though. I think there's still a lot of kids out there, but yeah.
So does that sound like something, your homework for the next 3 to 4 weeks?
I brought you my list.
Already. But if you just, email it to me, what you have, I'll summarize what everybody has. I'll put it together in a list, we'll share it when we come back on the May 20th. And we'll discuss it further. All in favor? All right. Right. You don't have anything else?
That's not.
Don, you have
I
anything
think I've
else?
said enough.
All
But
right.
just thank you, Tim, for, you know,
Well, yeah.
and for May 20, I'll plan to be back on the 20th because, I'm kind of thinking through this. I mean, it's gonna be like the day before. I might put the council work, I might put the council discussion on June 4th, but I don't. It's kind of tight the day before, so like, again, I'm trying to weigh that out on the 21st on our discussions with the council. So Barry, I guess maybe you might want to ask is if you like suddenly have this master list in a week or just.
Move up to due date.
Sooner the better.
Yeah,
You got a
so
week to
just-
put together.
No pressure, I think.
I'm just saying, I'm trying to, this is in my own mind, I'm trying to sort this out and like, you know, because I don't want to go to council and like, you know, with not really value that, you know, we don't not have all the information available. So that would determine whether I push this to the 4th of June or not, depending on how quickly that can come back. Yeah.
As soon as they start rolling, I'll start somewhere else. Then I'll get it. Anybody else have anything? Jim, you got anything you want to mention?
Nope.
All right, that's done. I do have one more question probably for you. In this that you handed out last week, the SDC eligibility improvements to current parks includes any improvements to an existing park such as additional parking, new playgrounds, new tennis courts or other. Okay. Additional parking. Okay, we need or we proposed additional parking for Maple Street Park for the softball fields. I guess we're told that that's not SDC eligible. Why is it's expanding, what's the,
Do we use SEC for the turf?
yes,
Well, then
it was supposed to be.
okay, I mean, if we use it for that, I would think that if that's expansion, then the parking can be expanded.
Right.
Just.
And also one of the playgrounds we were gonna have to close and move, but it was going to be improved because it was not ADA approved. So there were gonna have to be some modifications to the playground to make it ADA eligible for that part of the expansion that we did with the softball fields and stuff. So those were my two questions. It was,
Gut feeling for me is both of those could be growth share eligible. In particular, the playground, because you're adding some capacity, but you're sort of also replacing existing capacity. So, and same with the parking, I would think that the marginal amount that you're adding could be, I mean, we've included parking as a growth share eligible before, so.
Question to that, had an attorney years back tell me that you can use SCC fees on a park, say Maple, until it's 100% built up. Stuff is eligible in a walnut park for any type of growth until the park is at 100% development. So have you ever heard of anything like that?
Well, I guess I need to know more about what's meant by that.
Okay. Another time.
Yeah, sure, yeah, I'd be happy
So
to wrap it up.
there's a percentage, we choose a percentage on it.
And would that be, and again, I don't know how that was, Jerry, I'm sure that, I don't know if it was paid for or not paid for with SECs, but that could be a reimbursement perhaps, and is that? Sure.
Yeah.
If it was already paid for out of other funds, but it would be that growth share eligible, which is what, like 20% or something like that, or?
Kind of depends on, well, yeah, I guess it would be 28% with that.
Okay.
So is that the number we would use if we wanted to put a playground equipment upgrades and parking lot at Maple Park?
After the new methodology is adopted.
After the new method, okay,
If it's included as a project.
if it's included as a.
So we would need to put reimbursement projects in as projects as well.
So-
Well, yeah, we would want to enumerate
Add that
what
to
we
our 20
spent
years.
to add capacity.
Okay.
Yes, that we never did done.
Yeah, but does that timeline work for that project that you're?
I put it in the budget to start in July.
Well, yeah, but we're not gonna have our new methodology, so it'll have to be based on our existing methodology.
Yeah, so that doesn't make it SDC eligible in time.
When do we think that the new methodology is supposed to December?
And it is, yeah.
So that's still.
But that was in the
So-
24-25 budget for. That was
For
approved
general fund,
for general fund, yeah.
we were gonna pay for that out of the general fund. Which is not restricted.
But it was approved for $998,000.
We were approved for $2.2 million in Maple Street Park.
Over that.
So if you wanna use SDCs. Or it would have to be a council approval before the general fund funds. But I don't think we wanna get into that here.
Nope.
Jim has a point,
No, I really don't.
you don't?
Because I think they just answered it right
Oh,
there.
okay.
Because I was wondering where that project was, because I missed last meeting.
Which project?
The Maple Street parking, because we had voted on it, I know it went to council, this thing here, if this isn't the way this is agreed.
And Jim, tell me if
So I
I'm
know.
wrong on this
If I'm wrong.
interpretation, but I'll start on where we're at with it, because where we're at was, we had $2.2 million budgeted for Maple Street Park, the turf project and the playground equipment parking. Like that, and lighting, sorry, sorry. And then it left us with, after the turf and lighting was done, with like roughly 900,000. That 900,000 is coming out of the general fund. We're tightening the budget because we're tight on general funds, so they wanted to wait, start the engineering, get it done, and then when it's eligible for SDC funds through this new methodology, then we do the parking lot. And, but we were thinking that we'd be done sooner so that we could start that in summer, but it's not sounding like it's not gonna start in summer, so.
So is the,
Is that kind of it, Jim? Does that kind of sum it up? Yeah.
so I'm trying to, I guess, wrap my head, so it sounds, what I'm thinking is this new methodology is gonna help determine rate, not, it sounds like the FTC usage is not changing, these are kind of the state law, and this is how it's always been used. So if we were to have FTC money in the pot, and this is, if we're expanding capacity, why couldn't we dip into our current pot?
I thought it could. I
Does that
didn't, but I thought
Well, who made the decision that we could for this project,
for,
for Maple Street?
when Eileen approved it, that we could use SDCs after July 1, because it'll be on this approved list. So whenever this list is approved,
But he's saying why couldn't it now, I guess?
it would have to use general fund. We can't use SDCs now because it's not on the new list.
So unless you amend the project list through council,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
existing
yeah.
project list to include that.
So in the CPI, but it's not on the right list, is that basically?
It's not on this list, the 20-year list that we're doing tonight.
It's on the
I
CPI.
don't know.
For the list that we're gonna send to Barry.
Yep.
Somebody make sure you put in their email, yeah.
And that's
put that
what
in there.
so when it's on that list, and that list is adopted by council, we can use SDCs on the Maple Street project?
As long as it's determined to be SDC eligible, yeah, as long as it's capacity increasing and there's, and that component of the.
It's,
I think that's what we're doing.
That's all right.
so,
So that's a good,
go ahead.
he's got,
Yeah, but.
we got a huge trend over here for
Give
good questions, not
questions to
tricks.
Jim. Now Jim's gonna ask.
Well, he needs assist now. That's what he's looking for. He's done schooling. So how did projects ever get done with SDC money? Like, because that's part of Maple Street, like improvements, and so would the parking fee as well.
We really haven't done a lot of projects, that's why we have so much money in the bank.
But
We
it's
haven't
part
done
of,
until
well, but it's
recently.
part of,
How much, that's another question. How much money do we currently have in park systems? 6.6.
minus 1.46 for the turfing and lighting.
So Spring
So
Park would have been.
Locust Street, or the Senate,
Send it, Park,
how are we paying for that?
SDCs.
Okay.
It's on the list.
What list is this, where is this list at? That's, I think the question is, seems like
We're making it tonight.
Maple, but it's not, I mean, if we're using it now, how is this already
Right.
eligible? Yeah. Where-
Guys, I'm telling you,
Because it's
these
not,
are, no, I don't know.
it's on the CP.
That's what,
It's on the
that's what
CIP.
we're
I think
fixing
that's
right now. I
the
think-
question is, if we've been using it in the past, then why can't we use it for I mean, have we been doing something illegal here that we shouldn't be? I mean, it doesn't sound like we have this.
It depends on, Ryan, I don't even know how to answer that, to be honest. You know what I mean? I'm just as confused as you guys about this. We all are, and I think that's why he's here trying to clean this up. I don't know if we've been doing it right or wrong. We've been following past legal advice on how to do these projects. That's what we've been going off of. Now, if we wanted to dig into that, if that's right or wrong, I don't think we do. I mean, if there's something bad, but we have always worked with our attorneys on if it was SDC eligible and that type of stuff. So I believe that we've been doing everything right. I just think that we're in this confusing time of transitioning with this 20-year list. They're updating the CIP. I think everyone's just real frustrated with it.
So do we have a roadmap on how to get Maple Street Park, the parking done then for you? Like to make a list, like
Put it on the list.
put it on a list, and then that list has to go to council.
And
So when's the next council meeting? We can make a list by this week and get it to council,
the
right?
good thing about Maple, Jim, is I did do a budget request and it's in the next budget.
But you need, because you need general fund money as well.
No, it's under under SDCs.
So it's
So if we get this list done, we're ready to go. We can start July 1.
July.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's approved so far, so if it makes it through budget committee and council, we're good to go on Maple.
Jim, just maybe on
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
on this list, and I know we didn't talk about this today, but we could theoretically adopt the list and then come back and adopt the SDC methodology.
I think you would want to amend your existing SDC list. That would be my.
Which we would be doing, that would be the first step through council, though, okay.
And if you're trying to rush this project, you're trying to get this
Yeah.
done, and I'm not a lawyer, but put that on the existing SBC list
And
soon, and then, I don't know.
Can I say something else?
Of course, yeah.
So the other things you guys, like the sewer master plan, stormwater master plans, all that is my wheelhouse. And I had a 20-year list on those, and then I made the 5-year CIP off that, just so we knew where we were going. So I don't know if that makes sense for everyone. I don't know why parks has been different than that.
Yeah.
But we've just now started getting involved in it, so we're gonna have that working like that, if that makes sense to everyone. It'll go to the same, it's with all of it, the TSP, all of
Yeah,
it,
no,
so.
and the track road part is part of this as well, I mean, I'm just. The list, let's get the list, and that's the action item, and from there, our staff will move it forward,
And what's on the list, what's
everything.
budgeted, I'll tell everyone I'm taking to budget, or Spencer and I are taking to budget, is we're taking the Auburn Farms to budget, so we can start July 1. We're taking the Maple Street playground and parking lot, and and then a dog park.
Does Auburn Farms also have to be on the
Yes.
20-year list?
I think, yes.
Want it to be SDC.
Yeah, if you wanna use SDC, I'm gonna write it down. All right.
Can we agree as a board to have our lists to you by a certain time?
When do you want to buy?
Well, I wanna give you guys at least a week, I mean, this is gonna be, several.
Let's go.
Jim, can I don't think you heard me earlier like my sewer master plan, my stormwater master plan, all of that.
I know, I already
We have had
said it.
consultants to develop the master plan and then a 20-year list working with all of our people, so we get an accurate list. And then we just do a 5-year CIP off that. And I think like parks has never gotten done like that, because we've never had any money. We've never had any staff to build more parks. I think we're in that transition of going to that direction right now. Does that make sense, Ryan? Kind of. And after we get this established, on it's gonna be a lot easier. It's just frustrating right now.
Well, it's exciting because we're kind of building it.
You guys are getting to it, and we do have your projects that you want in budget if it's approved.
All right, have your list to me by the 25th. You were hoping for 9th, or you want to go home? 25th, and then I'll summarize it, and I'll give them.
This
I'll
is
give them
super
for
helpful.
that.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Even though I was in and out,
Call me,
okay,
call me.
So if they don't have a list to you by the 25th, we're gonna assume they don't have a list?
If I don't have, right.
I mean, we're not gonna wait on people who
I'm
have a
not, I'm
submit.
not waiting for it.
No.
I'm gonna put-
If you have a list in your head, put it on email and get it to Barry.
like,
But-
like this property out here, Jim, you know, the Three Sisters properties?
Yeah.
That was on, we got that on the list so we could purchase that with wastewater funds, SDCs. So if that makes sense, and we did it when it came available,
Yeah,
so we were able to do it, so. I'm gonna stop talking now, so yeah, I'm done.
Can I get a motion to adjourn? Kara, second? Kathy? All right, adjourn, all in favor, say.
I don't.
All right.
I know.
I'll give you a list.
Give me your list, go
26.
Start working on that list.
Ryan, don't put your property on there.